Well, welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to First Miami Presbyterian Church's discipleship, archaeology discipleship group. As we keep pedaling right along here into the New Testament, things are heating up for me because I can't just throw together slides and talk off the top of my head anymore. I've got to do real research and reading because a lot of this stuff is new to me. So it's really great that I get to learn along with you, hopefully just maybe a couple steps ahead of you. But this is new territory for me and I'm learning a lot. And honestly, we were going to go with part 2 of the beginnings of the church, but frankly, there was so much stuff that I had yet to read up on that I decided to switch next month's and move it up to this month. So I'd have a little less prep time and I'd be able to get this thing together and have more time to wait actually for a book or two to come in the mail as well. So I can get ready for December. So today it's going to be New Testament and coins. And this is an idea that I came up with a while back because I had a small growing collection of coins from the New Testament period. And I thought, well, this would be a chance for me to get in there and research these coins a little bit, learn some more about that, and hopefully shed more light on the New Testament. So having a chance to share it with you is a blessing for me. And I hope that this is a blessing for you as well. So what you're looking at here, I always have a theme verse, is a pile of widow's mites. Now that's a British translation of what takes different words in different translations that to actually translate. And in the old King James Version, hold on while I get this share going again. In the King James Version, it actually says a farthing. And then in the it's a cent in the new American English versions. So the verse says, and a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which amount to a cent. So this is the smallest denomination back then in their currencies and for us today. So that is where we'll start the presentation. I had to throw this together rather quickly because I forgot to put the updated dates and talks for the next 2 months, but we're here November 14th, New Testament of Coins, and then December 12th is the next talk on the beginnings of the church too, with the subtitle as well, right up to the time of Constantine, but we might have to break that up into further talks. In fact, I would like to put this to you. You guys were so good last time as to give me some ideas as to which way to go with this in the future. There's some other subtopics that I think we can break these things into as we go into the next year. And that is, for example, early Christian archaeology, which I'm just delving into. I could do a whole talk on the catacombs of Rome, which are an amazing place. If any of you have been there before, it's just an incredible ancient cemetery that has all kinds of interesting things, ancient iconography and early Christian art, symbols and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of interesting history there. We could do a whole talk on that. Just the formation of the canon, as I've mentioned before, that's probably good for a talk. The one that I had before already set out after Revelation, tracking down what happened to all the apostles after the New Testament ends. And then we have councils and controversies and the various, as I delve further into some of this early church history, I figured I was getting a little off my comfort zone because I was looking more at theology and not at archaeology. So I'm not a pastor nor am I a theologian. I am an archaeologist. So I'm going back to what we can find and dig up and discover through historical documents. But we will have to delve into some of these early ideas as well, especially when we start talking about the canon and how we got our Bibles. So think about that. And if you come up with some other topics that we could work on in the New Testament, please let me know. And we can come back to this at the end of the talk. So we're looking at money here. And to give you a little background, the history of coinage. Money, as you may know or may not know, has not always been around. Of course, there was bartering, there was trading. But when we go back to Old Testament times, it usually took the form of shekels and weights of particular precious metals. And the Old Testament is loaded with references to these things. There's a number of terms like shekel, Bekah, which is a half shekel. Pim is a third of a shekel. Rabah, quarter of a shekel. Gerah, 20th of a shekel, and a talent. And they've actually discovered some of these weights because you had to have a regulated set of weights to weigh the metals with. So these are actual finds of stones that were weighed and labeled with the appropriate weights on them. And I think they've even found a couple that weren't quite right. So these traders were kind of playing fast and loose, as you can imagine, with the weights for the shekels. But this is how money operated before coins were invented. But the first coins that they do find, there's pretty much a consensus on where they were first developed or invented, if you will. And that was in central Turkey in the area of Lydia. And they were a blend of a natural mixture of gold and silver called electrum. And this was during the 7th century BC when the first coins emerged. And then they were passed on and they were adopted by the Persian Empire after that. They seem to be initially minted by merchants as tokens for trade transactions. And generally considered the oldest coin, or the oldest type of coin, is called the Lydian lion. So here's a beautiful coin, beautifully preserved. It's widely considered to be the oldest coin. It has a lion facing a bull. And some of the first coins they find have seem to be associated with the name of King Aliates, which is late 7th century, and the years there 610 to 550 BC. Here's another beautiful electrum coin with a lion head, also Lydian, and it's denominated with, already they're having denominations and subdivisions of their coins as 1/3 in this case. And here's another one from the city of Ephesus, which you may know from the New Testament, and a nice example there from the 7th century, and it shows a grazing stag. And again, those indentations in the back. Here's a really beautiful one. You may be familiar with the famous legendary King Croesus. The old phrase goes that he was rich as Croesus. So this King Croesus was a Lydian king who was a little bit later than the one we discussed earlier of the first coins, but he seemed to have developed the coins even further and advanced them. They had these coins called staters, which were both in gold and in silver. And they developed a ratio between the gold and the silver. So the gold ones were more valuable, and they equaled about 20 silver coins. So you have the first bimetallic coin system being developed here in Lydia in the 7th and 6th centuries BC. One of the other supports for the idea that the Lydians were the first ones to come up with coins comes from Herodotus, the Greek historian, who said that the Lydians were the first people to use silver and gold coins and the first to establish retail shops in permanent locations. So we have strong evidence for this idea that they were the first. All right, so we go into some of our biblical coins, and the first one we're going to look at is the widow's mite. And probably we're going to talk about several stories where these coins come up, and I'm sure you're familiar with some of them. So we're going to be looking at lots of scripture today. I hope you all don't mind. I mean, this is a church after all, isn't it? This is a widow's mite here. So this is the smallest of denominations of coins of the day. And this story appears in Mark chapter 12 and Luke chapter 21. And here we have at the temple treasury, and Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and began watching how the people were putting money into the treasury. And many rich people were putting in large amounts. And a poor widow came and put in 2 lepta which amount to a quadrans. Calling his disciples to him, he said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury. For they all put in out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she owned, all she had to live on." So this is the widow's mite, and this is where the famous story comes from. A little bit more about this widow's mite. It's very small. You can see it in relation to a human hand and to an American penny. Tiny. The actual word mite or lepton means small or thin. So it's the smallest kind of coin in circulation. In the first century, it was worth about 1/64th of a denarius, which was about a day's wage. And many of these in very large quantities were minted by Alexander Jannaeus, who was a Hasmonean king of Judea from the years 103 to 76 BC, when they were briefly an independent kingdom before the Romans took them over. So they had just thousands upon thousands of these coins that were still circulating in the first century during Jesus' day. And this is interesting in that it actually is bilingual. So on one side of it, we have Greek, Basileos Alexander, which means King Alexander in Greek. So that would be on the left side. And then an upside down anchor, probably struck following the conquest of coastal areas in 95 BC by the new Jewish kingdom, and represents their annexation. So you have an upside down anchor, which was a symbol they had adopted from an earlier kingdom called the Seleucids, which were in Syria. They used it to represent their naval strength. And the anchor is depicted as it would have been hanging on the side of a ship, naturally, just as it would appear in real life. On the other side, the obverse, there's a star with 8 rays and a central pellet surrounded by a diadem, which symbolizes royalty. And the star symbolizes heaven. And in Paleo-Hebrew, between the rays of the star, it says Yehonatan, the king. So you have Paleo-Hebrew and Greek on opposite sides of this coin. So that's the widow's mite. Our next one is the 30 pieces of silver, the infamous 30 pieces of silver. I'm sure most of you could tell the story about the 30 pieces of silver. There are several coins this could be, the most prominent of which is the Tyrian shekel or tetradrachm. But there are several other similar kind of coins that were minted elsewhere, like in Antioch and elsewhere in the empire, that this also could be referring to. It doesn't specifically say, but the Tyrian shekel was the most common one in use at that time. And it had the likeness of the Phoenician god Melkart or Baal, and it was accepted by the Greeks as an equivalent to the Olympian Heracles, which we know as Hercules. So he was quite the muscular god who went about slaying monsters and such in mythology. These were issued out of the Phoenician city of Tyre between the years 126 BC and AD 56. And they bore the Greek inscription of Tyre, the holy city, and the city of refuge. And it's just a beautiful coin. This is a beautifully preserved specimen. So I just, one of the things I love about archaeology is the ancient artwork. So these are real works of art here we're looking at. This currency took on an unusual role as in the Jewish culture as a medium of payment for the temple tax in Jerusalem. Now, because the Roman coinage was only 80% silver, the pure Tyrian shekels, which were 94% or more, were required to pay the temple tax in Jerusalem. Now, after the Roman Empire closed down the mint in Tyre, the Roman authorities actually allowed the Jewish rabbanim, or the rabbis, to continue minting Tyrian shekels in Judea, with the restriction that they had to continue the same iconography and the exact same minting and style as they had originally been making. Now, we look more specifically at the 30 pieces of silver and the scriptural currents here where they're talking. You, of course, know this would be Judah, and one of the 12, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me to deliver him up to you?" Jesus, of course, he's referring to. And they weighed out to him 30 pieces of silver, and from then on, he began looking for a good opportunity to betray him. So these are, that's the 30 pieces of silver. Now, actually, if you go out and you try to buy some of those, now, all of these coins you can find online, or if you go to Israel, they actually sell them legally in the souvenir shops. But those 30 pieces of silver, those Tyrian shekels, are quite expensive. Now, these, on the other hand, are very cheap. Now, a really nice example of one you might be able to get for about $100. And then if it's well worn, you can get these for $15, $20. So these are prutas, which is actually a Hebrew word that appears in the Mishnah and the Talmud from the 1st century BC to the 5th century AD. And this is just a random collection of prutas. Now, Judea was governed by Roman prefects and procurators between the years of 86 and 66. There were 14 of these procurators, but only 6 of them actually issued coins, which included, in our case here, Pontius Pilate, Felix, and Festus. We know it from the book of Acts from the last time we had a talk. Now, these were unique among Roman coins in breaking from normal standards of design and style that the Romans had. These had a particular Jewish style, so they were expressing their own Jewish designs through these coins. They were inscribed in Greek, so they were understood by the local inhabitants, or at least many of them. All were pruta denominations, that is, all of these procurators and prefect coins, and they were minted also in very large quantities. So they're readily available today. They've been found in both in excavations and illicitly. So there's just thousands and thousands of them. That's why they're not priceless when you can actually buy them. The procurator names are actually not inscribed on these coins, but they're determined by the regnal year of the named Roman emperor, whose name also always appears on the coins. Now, here we have one, again, pruta means a coin of smaller value. Now, these are the coins that were minted during the governorship of Pontius Pilate. 10 pruto, I just put some redundancy here, equaled about what a loaf of bread would cost in antiquity. The Roman coins were minted in Judea and were inscribed in the Greek language, as we just discussed. These were the three that appeared during Pilate's reign. Sorry, I'm jumping around here on my. So they appeared in the year 16, which equates to AD 29. Now, he reigned for about 10 or 11 years, between 26 and 36. And three mints that he had were in AD 29, 30, and 31. Now, you see the top one is different, and the second two are virtually identical. So they're basically two designs. So the AD 29 design features something called a simpulum, which is a wine container used in Roman religious ceremonies, and it has the name Tiberius Caesar, the Roman emperor of the time when Pontius Pilate was governor or prefect of Judea. So this is a pagan symbology, and that's actually an ancient simpulum, which would have held wine. Also, it has on the other side 3 stalks of barley and the words Empress Julia on the reverse, who is Tiberius's mother, with year 16. That would have been the year 16 of the reign of Tiberius. Now, the second design features a latus staff, which was used in Roman ceremonies related to astrology, and has, again, the word Tiberius Caesar on it. And this is a stela, or a carved sort of statue in relief on a wall that shows some priestesses, I presume, using a latus staff, one in her right hand there. So it's fairly small. It's like a little hand staff. Now, this one also bears the date years 17 and 18 inside of a wreath. So, of course, these relate to the reign of Pontius Pilate. But we also have, as you may recall, we've talked about this before, other evidence of Pontius Pilate in Judea, and in an inscription which mentions his name, and what was probably a dedication to a temple called a Tiberium, which would have involved worship of the emperor. And he's named as a prefect of Judea, which he is now giving and dedicating to his boss, as it were, back in Rome. But this stone was found in secondary context, so it was in a step in a theater, which was also an ancient structure, but it had been taken down from its original public display and reused as a stepping stone. It might have looked like this originally in its complete form. And here we have a picture of Pontius Pilate himself in the movie Ben-Hur. And here, as he just begins to start the chariot race, which was, of course, won by one Ben-Hur, played by Charlton Heston. Okay, so they just found another thing that relates to Pontius Pilate, and it's a small ring that was found at a place called Herodium, which is one of the fortresses built by King Herod, and which King Herod was actually buried at when he died. It's just south of Jerusalem, a few miles. They found this little ring, which is made of copper alloy. It's not a particularly finely made ring. It was actually found in the 1960s, but they only recently were able to clean it adequately and actually read it. It reads of Pilates, or Pilates, in Greek letters set around a picture of a wine crater. So it's a rather simple affair, but it is another form of evidence for the presence of Pontius Pilate in the land or kingdom of Judea. Now we move to another king whose name was Aretas, and we know him that he was actually a royal line of Aretuses. He was the fourth, Aretas the fourth. king of the Nabateans, and he called himself Philodim, which is lover of his people. Now, he ruled for quite a long time, almost 50 years, from 9 BC to AD 40. And if you're familiar with the Nabatean kingdom, it was over in what is today Jordan, mostly in the south of Jordan, all the way down to the Red Sea, and all the way up when they were most powerful during the reign of Aretas IV, all the way up to Damascus. This is sort of a stylized depiction of him and his wife, which is based on a coin of which you'll see presently. Now, this ties into the book of Acts and the adventures of our man Paul. So he is relating in the book of 2 Corinthians 11, he was describing how he escaped Damascus. And I'll just read it. In Damascus, the ethnarch under Aretas, the king, so the governor of Damascus, or the mayor, if you will, who was actually under Aretas the fourth, was guarding the city of the Damascenes in order to seize me. And I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall, and so escaped his hands. So here we have a depiction of Paul being lowered in a basket. And then we go back to the book of Acts, and here's Luke, the historian, writing about what happened to Paul in Damascus. When many days had elapsed, the Jews plotted together to do away with him, but their plot became known to Saul. They were also closely watching the gates day and night so that they might put him to death. But his disciples took him at night and let him down through an opening in the wall, lowering him in a large basket. And once again, the same depiction. Now, I've actually had a chance to visit this area many years ago and look for that spot on the wall. Well, they don't necessarily have the very hole in the wall or the window, but they actually have a commemorative gate, which may be, near where it actually happened. It's difficult and impossible to know, but it's called Bab Kisan. And they have a small chapel there called the Chapel of St. Paul. And I'll note here also, there's a couple of Chi-Rho symbols here on the left and the right towers, which is a symbol for Christ, the first two letters of his name. And that's also going to come up into play with the early Christian symbols and stuff in the catacombs. So here's that as it's getting a little darker, a nice little light coming out of what I think is probably depicting the window from which he would have escaped. And then the very small, nicely kept and fairly Spartan chapel right there for St. Paul. So we look at King Aretas IV, king of the Nabateans, Philodim, which means lover of his people. And here's a beautifully preserved coin with Aretas IV and his wife. Her name was Queen Shakulat. So it's him and his wife. He actually had two wives, so some of his other coins actually have his other wife. So you have conjoined busts of the two king and queen. And on the other side, two cross cornucopias, which are a symbol of abundance, and a three-line Aramaic inscription from top to bottom saying Aretas Shakalit. The Shakalit is actually broken up into two lines. They have to squeeze in with the letters with not a whole lot of space to work with there. So interesting that we have Aramaic being used on the coin because there's also a Nabatean language, of which I've not studied, but in looking at this inscription for the first time, so the literature on it indicates that it was the Nabatean language, and all of the inscriptions they find in what is today modern Jordan, where the ancient kingdom was located, they have actually a mixture of the two languages being used on various inscriptions. This particular one was found in the city of Madaba, which you may have heard of from mostly Old Testament history, and it's carved for, it's a funerary inscription to a governor by the name of Itbael. So this Itbael also was related in a way to Aretas. In the final line of the inscription, it actually mentions the regnal year of Aretas at 46, the 46th year of Aretas, king of the Nabateans, lover of his people, the same title that he's known as in other inscriptions. Philodim is the Greek. And we can date this inscription to about the year 8037, which is not long after Paul had his little adventure in escaping Damascus. But it's a beautifully preserved funerary inscription that was found in Madaba. Now, the kingdom of Nabatea, this was mostly a kingdom. This is a very marginal zone in southern Jordan over into the Sinai, if you look to the west of the Red Sea. And then all of this to the east is desert. So what was primarily their source of income was caravan routes. So during the peak of their power, they controlled caravan routes running all across this area, east, west, north, and south. And their control extended all the way up to the north here in Damascus for a time. This would have been in the first century BC, first century AD. And then the Romans came through a bit later and started to take away some of their caravan routes and their territory. So they had a relatively brief period of prosperity and power, and then lesser so after that. So the Nabateans did reach Damascus during the reign of Aretas III. That was the previous king to our Aretas IV. And they reached the peak of their power during the reign of Aretas IV. Now, some of you may recognize this. And if anyone's been to Petra, it's spectacular. It's down at the southern, this was their capital, way down in the southern part of Jordan towards the Red Sea. And it's just this amazing place that's carved out of cliffs. And you go through this area called the Souk. It's a very narrow divide that's been worn by weathering, I think primarily by water, a very narrow passageway which takes you in sort of to the city. And then you open up into this amazing structure called the Treasury, which is carved right out of the face of the cliff. And all of these structures date to this time of the first century AD. Now, some of you may be familiar with this, this structure because it occurred and it was shown and featured in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with Sean Connery. And so you may have seen it then. So here, now we're going to move on. That was Aretas IV. Now we're looking at Paul appearing before Antonius Felix. So the last time we talked a lot about the book of Acts. So we have these two procurators of Judea, which occur in succession. You have Felix and then Festus. Of course, remember, if you go back to the time when Paul was arrested in Jerusalem, he was accused of taking an individual named Trophimus, that is a non-Jew, into the temple area, which was forbidden by penalty of death. Now, according to the scriptures, he didn't actually do that, but he was falsely accused of it. So they put him under house arrest and they took him up to Caesarea and sort of put him on trial before the Roman procurators. Now, they said much of sort of almost like what Pontius Pilate said about Jesus, like the Jewish people who wanted to charge him with these offenses were involved with debating theological points of the Jewish religion as the Romans saw it at this time. It was just another form of this Jewish religion, and they really didn't care a whole lot about what they were squabbling about, and were just as happy to say, you guys settle the religious squabbles. You know, if this affects the empire or something against the emperor, our power or authority, then we'll get involved. But otherwise, we just want you guys to figure it out yourself. But of course, his accusers wouldn't rest until he was done in with. So he was kept under house arrest for quite some time. And the first procurator that he appeared before was Felix, Antonius Felix, who reigned for a few years here in the middle of the first century. So the high priest, now here he is on trial or having his case discussed. The high priest Ananias came down with some elders to Caesarea, which was the provincial capital of the governor of Judea right on the coastline there, north of Jerusalem. So they came up with some elders and a certain attorney named Tertullus, and they brought charges to the governor against Paul in Acts chapter 24. And they go on to say, for we have found this man a real pest and a fellow who stirs up dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And he even tried to desecrate the temple, and we arrested him. So here are the charges laid up against Paul. Now here, this was that amazing sequence of names of rulers and wives and such that is so remarkable about Luke's meticulous history in the book of Acts during this sequence of events. So Felix's wife Drusilla comes and appears, and he calls Paul out to talk to him again with Drusilla in presence. I kind of like this little depiction. You got the leopard skin there as a rug. I don't know how realistic that is, but it's the best I could find of a depiction with Drusilla in it. So it goes to say, but some days later, Felix arrived with Drusilla, his wife, who was a Jewess, and sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Jesus Christ. At the same time, too, he was hoping money would be given him by Paul Therefore, he also used to send for him quite often and converse with him, hopefully to get some money from Paul. So his sentiments were not pure. He didn't just want to hear about the gospel. He wanted some money. He wanted to get paid off. Okay, so but after 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And wishing to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul imprisoned instead of letting him go or sending him to Rome, which was, of course, to occur in the not too distant future. So here we have another pruta, this one from the procurator Antonius Felix, who ruled for 8 years from 52 to 59. Now, this is a really well-preserved coin as well. He was the 11th procurator of Judea in that period of time from 6 to 66. The obverse, that is the front side of the coin, was a typical Roman kind of style and design. It has 2 cross shields and spears, which symbolize power. And it has the name Nero Claudius, which was one of Claudius, the Emperor Claudius's 2 sons. On the reverse side, his other son's name is given, Britannica, just in 4 letters. You can see it at the top here. It's kind of broken off and worn away, B-R-I-T, which was a second one of Claudius's sons. It also has a palm tree and the regnal year. And here we have Paul before Felix. So he's pleading his case. I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. I'm standing before Caesar's tribunal where I ought to be tried because, of course, he was a Roman citizen. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know, speaking to Festus. I appeal to Caesar. So he's making his final plea is he's pull out his ace in the hole, as it were. Then when Festus has conferred with his council, he answered, you have appealed to Caesar you shall go. So this begins his long journey, and we discussed it last time, his shipwreck voyage, where he goes past, he ends up shipwrecked in Malta and meets with Publius. He has all kinds of adventures on the way and finally makes his way to Rome, where he's put under house arrest. And the last we know of, he's still preaching the gospel in a sort of house arrest situation. So here we have the pruta of Procurator Porcius Festus, who ruled from 59 to 62. It was minted, as I said, by procurators in Judea. Later, actually, the Jews minted some during the first Jewish revolt. We call these Masada coins. So they were imitating the Roman style of coins, but they were asserting national independence by doing so. These are the so-called Masada coins. I'll discuss those a little bit later. Now, Festus was the 12th of the procurators, and he again assumes a Jewish identity and style with the coins that he minted, with a palm branch surrounded by regnal year 5 on the obverse, or the backside. In the name of Nero, in 3 lines within the wreath, also appear on the reverse side. So that's on the right. Now, King Herod the Great, who built the temple and who was the first of the Herods and who had several sons, dies in about 4 BC, and his kingdom is divided amongst his sons. And here we have a plethora of Herods, which occur throughout the New Testament. It gets a little confusing, but here was his kingdom as it was divided among the 3 of his surviving sons. It's called a tetrarchy. So Antipas was given the region to the east of the Jordan known as Perea, along with the Galilee. So this is the green areas over here to the north east of the Dead Sea, and then up here in the Galilee, where Tiberias is located in the Sea of Galilee. Philip was given the region to the northeast of the Sea of Galilee, known as Gaulonitis, way up here, or Caesarea Philippi, which he renamed after himself. And Archelaus was given the regions of Idumea, which is sort of a successor to the ancient Edomites, which were in the south of Jordan, but they had also extended their control over into the south part of Judah. And it was during this period called Idumea, which is just a derivation of Edom. So Archelaus was given the most important parts of the territory: Idumea, Samaria, and most importantly, Judah. So that's the central part right here in pink. And Archelaus ruled, but only lasted only about 2 years before the Romans came in and deposed him, and they annexed his territory into the Roman province of Judea. So his rule was fairly short-lived. Now here we have King Herod Agrippa I, which is the grandson, okay, of King Herod the Great. He ruled from the years AD 41 to 44. He was a grandson of Herod the Great. The obverse, that is the front side, shows a canopy symbolizing royalty and Agrippa's kingly status. And the reverse side shows 3 ears of barley, which signifies a land of plenty. And here is a bust of King Agrippa, or Herod Agrippa, who met an untimely demise, unfortunately. And this also shows a coin which he minted with his own bust appearing on it. And I found a very interesting tie-in, and actually you could say sort of a synchronism, in having a report of the same event occurring both in the Bible and something from outside of the Bible, in this case, Josephus. So in Acts chapter 12, it says, "Now about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. And he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword." Now, this isn't the James, the brother of Jesus. This is James, the son of Zebedee. So he's put to death with a sword. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. On an appointed day, Herod, having put on his, now this is a little bit later in the next set of verses in Acts chapter 12, verses 21 through 23. On an appointed day, Herod, having put on his royal apparel, took his seat on the rostrum. In the Greek, this is known as the bema, and began delivering an address to them. The people kept crying out, "The voice of a God and not of a man." And immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and died. Kind of gruesome. Well, we find in Josephus in Antiquities an account of his death as well. It says, "On the second day of the spectacles, he put on a garment made wholly of silver, of a truly wonderful texture, and came into the theater early in the morning. There the silver of his garment, being illuminated by the fresh reflection of the sun's rays, shone out in a wonderful manner, and was so resplendent so as to spread awe over those that looked intently upon him. Presently his flatterers cried out, one from one place and another from another, though not for his good, that he was a god." Sounds kind of similar. Josephus goes on to write, "A severe pain arose in his belly, striking with a most violent intensity. He therefore looked around upon his friends and said, 'I, whom you call a god, am commanded presently to depart this life. Who is by you called immortal, am immediately to be hurried away by death.'" So he was not having a good time. "And when he had been quite worn out by the pain in his belly for 5 days, he departed this life, being in the 54th year of his age and the 7th year of his reign." So that was the end of King Herod Agrippa, as told in Josephus and in the book of Acts. Now we have, these are more or less arranged in chronological order. So now we're to the end of the Roman period of Judea, when they start their first Jewish revolt to try to throw off the domination of the Roman Empire. They minted a coin of the first Jewish revolt here, which is from AD 66 to 70. Now, these are not found in great numbers, so these are very valuable. And if you can find one that's this well preserved, it costs a good few dollars. So obverse side of this has a two-handle amphora and says year 2. Now, this is year 2 of the rebellion. So by minting a coin of their own, a pruta, they were asserting their independence from Rome, which was obviously a direct challenge to the authority of the Romans. On the reverse side of this coin is a vine branch and a leaf with the inscription, "Freedom of Zion." And here is Masada itself, the desert top fortress built by King Herod, and in which the last of the holdouts against the Roman assault against to put down the Jewish revolt took place here with the Zealots and others who had gathered on this mountaintop fortress to hold out against the Romans. And the Romans besieged them. And right here on the left side of this picture, you can see what is left of the siege ramp of the Romans from 2,000 years ago. And the coin minted here called the Masada coin because they found hordes of these coins on Masada when they excavated there. So this is a coin of the first Jewish revolt, which was between 66 and 73. It's a bronze pruta like the ones before it. This particular one was minted in the year AD 68. It's known as a Masada coin since the large hordes were found at the ancient site. On the obverse side of the coin is an amphora with a broad rim and two handles with the Hebrew for the words year two. And on the reverse side, a vine leaf on a small branch that says for the freedom of Zion. Now, the ultimate, of course, the downfall of the kingdom of Judah, or I should say Judea, as depicted here in Rome on the Arch of Titus. Now, Titus was the Roman emperor who did destroy the temple of King Herod, the one of Jesus' day, and took into captive and people, and also captured all of the temple treasures, including the golden menorah, which you see being carried here in a triumph or a victory parade that was staged back in Rome. This is now in Rome and still standing, the Arch of Titus. So this was the final disposition of the kingdom of Judea, and coins commemorated by Vespasian, who was the father of Titus, and a beautifully preserved coin here, which is minted by Vespasian. It's called a sestertius. It was minted as a victory celebration of the victory in the Jewish revolt. And on the legend, on the reverse side of it, it says Judea conquered. So these coins, of which there are several variations, are called Judea capta. The side which says Judea capta shows a seated female that's in a position of mourning at the base of a palm tree. And there's a captive bearded man standing behind her with his hands bound behind his back. The SC that's below the ground here of the two individuals means by the decree of the Senate. And we have here one that's minted by Titus from the year AD 79. And this shows a bound kneeling captive in front of a trophy of arms with a shield and swords and sort of armor. So Judea capta coins were struck for 25 years under Vespasian and under two of his sons who succeeded him as emperor, and that is Titus and Domitian. So they really took this and wrote it as far as they could. You kind of wonder if some people got sick of them celebrating of something that happened a quarter of a century ago to a very small kingdom compared to the might of the Roman Empire. But nonetheless, that's what they had in those beautiful coins. We are now at 1:04, so I only went a little bit over time. I got a late start. We talked about a lot of coins here. There are even more coins. I will be seeing coins in my sleep, I'm sure, because I've been looking at so many of these things recently. But we've tied in as much as we could to actual biblical people and events, and hopefully given you another look, another dimension and context to what we read about in Scripture, both to give us a better understanding of the text and also, of course, to verify and corroborate its historical authenticity and reliability. So with that, I would ask you all to open up for any questions. I'll just finish here by saying our next talk is going to be December the 12th, and it's going to be on the beginnings of the church, part 2. And if you want to visit firstmiami.org/groups, you can learn more about First Miami's Archaeology Discipleship class series and also about the other church groups that we have available online and hopefully very soon in person. So without further ado, I open the floor for questions or comments or suggestions also as to future talks.